It was the 1st of November. My back was hurting me tremendously. I slowly rubbed my belly. The idea that within just a month I would have my child was beyond thrilling, but deep down terrifying as well. How in the course of a few months life has changed for me. If you asked me, certainly working in a mental hospital wasn't an easy job, but we needed that yearly bonus if we wished to survive the medical bills this child will bring. Before I could wander off further, I heard an ambulance coming in. Head Warden Rose came. "Gabrielle, there's a new entry, and please presume the documentation worked with the authority before dismissing them." I nodded my head. Years later, I still wonder what would have happened that day if I refused to take that request. Would life have evolved differently? But when the devil has eyes set on you, every goodness in this world crawls away. As soon as I entered the hallway which connected to the main entrance, our male nurses were pulling in a chair. As soon as they turned towards me, my feet halted. In a wheelchair, there might have been a 12-year-old boy. The temperature dropped. With my eyes on the child, I saw a lady coming down from the back of the ambulance because of the dark. I wasn't able to properly see her face. I signaled them to come behind me. As I walked quickly to get to my desk, the clock vibrated through the corridor. Despite the rush, I looked at the clock and suddenly stopped. It was 3:15. Why does the clock make the midnight sound at this time? "Ma'am," a voice screeched the silence and made me jump to my bones. "I'm so sorry to startle you like I," shuddering a bit, "apologize again. We thought you heard considering we were just behind you," one of the male staff spoke. Calming myself down, I told them not to worry. Quickly grabbing the registrar, I asked them to give me patient details. Jack Scaffold, son of caretakers in Will's house, killed the house owner's daughter with mirror glass, 14 wounds to be exact. It was pretty obvious that the child wouldn't have survived. My blood ran cold. Looking at the boy sleeping in front of me, it was unimaginable how he could hold the potential to do this. It felt like I could hardly breathe when the information sank in further, deepening the feeling I had in the hallway. The dispirited bulbs flickered on the ceiling, and at the same time on the walls there was faint shinning. Jack Scaffold, a name that rang in my ears as loudly as the sound of machines in the hospital's background. I jot down these details with my hands, which were visibly shaking. "Where is the mother?" I queried, my tone low like a whisper. The male nurse turned his head back and looked at the shadowy figure who was standing close to the vehicle. "She said she would not come in," he added, continued by saying something about not being able to leave the other children alone. Strange, right? She never even attempted to cast a glance at her son, as if the young man before her was not her son. My eyebrows knit together as I leaned closer to look through the glass door. The woman, who seemed to come nearer under the dim light of the street lamp, had an almost mournful look around her. Then she looked deep into my eyes, and then she disappeared into the darkness. "Let's take him to his room," I said in a loud whisper, although I was shivering. "We have a lot of paperwork still. We can do it later." It was puzzling to note that the farther we extended along the passage, the cold feeling became even more prominent. There was a palpable weight in the air whenever Jack was around, like he was the harbinger of bad news all the time. I'm not sure why his being wheeled into room 13 didn't make me feel better. In fact, I was feeling increasingly uncomfortable. An iron bed, a chair, and a table were the only furniture in a simple room with all the amenities. I decided within myself that I would persuade the doctor to conduct a thorough examination in the morning. Watching the nurses as they left him to his own devices, it was unbelievable how swiftly they worked. When they vacated the room, I was left with only Jack for company. The swelling had gone down on his face, and he looked calm as he slept, though he had been a murderer. How could this nice-looking boy from the family photo turn into the monster depicted in the report? Instantaneously, a chill ran through the room. The cold air caused me to exhale, and the vapor formed a cloud in front of me. I looked around myself, trying to find the reason why I suddenly felt cold. He stepped through the door, and the darkness in the corners of the office seemed to breathe. I turned my head and dismissed it as the product of imagination and my constant fatigue over the past few months. The soft sound of breathing interrupted the stillness of the night. I tried to look up at the ceiling and saw that Jack's eyes were wide open and seemed vacant. He began to mumble something in a whisper, not loud enough for me to make out what exactly he was saying. I tried to cover my ears to hear what he was saying in a low tone. "She's here. She is always here." "Who, Jack?" I said apprehensively. "Who is always here?" His gaze fell on me, and I could sense a beast in him, something primal within those black eyes. "She forced me into killing Jack. Please, spare me." I shuddered in my seat. I stopped, attempting to calm myself down a little. "You should sleep, Jack," I said gently. "We will continue our conversation tomorrow." Just as I was preparing to walk away, the door suddenly banged shut with an almost thunderous roar. The ceiling light started blinking erratically before it finally went off. Panic surged through me. I groped for my flashlight, sending the beam into the darkness. Jack is seated. His eyes are red. "She won't let me rest," he said, his tone nearly a growl. "She feeds on fear, on pain, on life." Suddenly, a cold and wet hand rested on my shoulder. I quickly turned around with the flashlight directed at a ghostly figure. It was the woman from the ambulance, but she looked diabolical. Her face was emaciated, eyes deeply settled in the orbits. She clutched a spirit's babe to her bosom, a child with lips that gave an eerie sucking sound. "Let him be," she whispered, her voice as loud as a hissed cymbal. "He's mine. They promised if I save the child, he will be mine to possess." I stepped back, adrenaline rushing through my veins. "Who are you?" The apparition smiled, revealing rows of sharp, decayed teeth. "I am the Mother, Mother Mary. I come for those who are lost, who wander into darkness. This child is bound to me now." That night, sleep eluded me. I kept hearing Jack's words and seeing that horrid apparition. Every creak and groan of the old building set my nerves on edge. The stories I'd heard from other staff about strange occurrences in the hospital played over in my mind. Jack's eyes rolled in his head and he went stiff, falling back onto the bed. I went to him as fast as I could, and my hands went right through his body as if he'd been a fine mist. Suddenly, everything was moving and the walls were becoming narrower and touching me. I cried for help, but what could I do? My voice was overwhelmed by the dark atmosphere. The figure stepped forward, the silent coldness of her exhale freezing my entire being. "You will not intrude. This place is my own." At last, with all my remaining strength, I leaped toward the door, grabbed the handle with my fingers. I grabbed the door and lurched into the hall, the suffocating aura dissipating as quickly as it had emerged. The lights came back to their usual level. The cold went away. I glanced to see that Jack's room was as it had been before. The ghostly apparition was no longer present. The boy continued to stay flat on the bed, looking so relaxed, save for the perspiration on his brow, an indication of the gruesome events that had unfolded. I sprinted towards the head warden's office, trying to think of what I could do to help. "Rose, there's something strange with Jack. There's something abnormal." "I told you so," she said, but her eyes reflected both apprehension and disbelief. "I think it's high time you had a break, Gabrielle. You've been under pressure." "No," I insisted. "You must trust me now. There is sinister about this place or him." Rose groaned and rested her hands on her head. "I know the horrors he's implicated, but still at the end of the day, he's a child. We will watch him closely in the future, but for now, you have to get some sleep for both yourself and the baby." A few days later, around 3 a.m., the same time as before, I heard a soft crying echoing through the halls. It was a sound no one should ever hear in a place like this, the cry of a newborn. My heart was ready to come out of my chest. As I strolled towards room 13, the wailing turned into screaming. Getting all my courage, I peeked into the room. Everything went still. Jack was sleeping peacefully. Before I could move further, a head upside down peeked from the door. I stumbled back, and a sharp pain shot through my lower abdomen. The lady came forward with stabs all around her chest. She gently caressed my belly before I fainted. When I opened my eyes, I was in a neat and bright room. A nurse told me how lucky I was to have such a beautiful daughter, and as her mother, I should let her latch. She brought my child and helped her settle. As soon as she latched on my breast, my heart filled with love. At last, horror of the night was over. I will take my daughter away to save her from all fear. With these thoughts, I rested my head on the pillow. Sharply, I felt a pain shoot through my breast. As I peeked down, my daughter with dark eyes as Mother Mary flashed her teeth to me, which were stained with blood, as she tugged away the torn part of my breast.